In late 1999, Daffney burst onto the scene in World Championship Wrestling, first as a stalker of David Flair, and she showed up at WCW Starrcade 1999, and wrestling fans tuning in wondered, who is this gothic starlet? Who is this gothic enchantress? Who is this captivating individual? Daffney had arrived, and she made the most of any opportunity that she was given, no matter how small the amount of television time was, no matter what the pay-per-view match was, no matter what the spot was called, it didn't matter. Daffney gave every bit of her mind, body, and soul to the wrestling business because she was a born entertainer. After WCW ended, she went through a whole lot because she loved professional wrestling. She continued to sweat and bleed professional wrestling. And unfortunately, she paid the ultimate price. In the end, like many, she paid the ultimate price. People that were in her inner circle, friends, family, knew her as Shannon. Wrestling fans all over the world knew her as Daffney. And I think I speak for many when I say I wish she was still here. I wish she was still here to see just how much she was appreciated. Not just as a wrestler and entertainer, but just as a person. Reach out to those that you love, folks. Make sure you do. Make sure you do it while they're still here. I'm John Renton with my review, Dark Side of the Ring, the Scream Queen, Daffney. Boy, she could scream. My goodness, she could scream. She was absolutely captivating from the moment that I saw her on WCW television. I wish she had gotten bigger opportunities in professional wrestling. She left a hell of a goddamn mark, and this was a fucking tough episode, so if I crack a few times, I apologize. I knew that this episode was going to be tough because, and I'm going to get to it in the review, but I remember actually being online just as a fan and seeing clips of the Instagram Live and seeing just what she was going through and people trying to reach out, and we were hoping. We were all hoping that somehow she would be found, be okay. That this is obviously a super rough patch, and she's obviously been through a whole lot, and the injuries and all the stuff, and I didn't know about the bipolar disorder and stuff like that. I found out more about that here, but we all thought, it's okay, this won't. And then our hearts sunk because we knew. And we're just fans. I feel so bad for her inner circle of friends, her dad and brother that were talking heads on this. Mick Foley, Crowbar was a great talking head. I don't know why this episode got to me so much. And yes, I use dark humor about many things. People in wrestling, people in entertainment. In general, that's just what I do. That's how I deal with dark subjects. But there's not a lot of humor I got for this one. For some reason, this really deeply affected me. And the thing is, I'd only seen a few years of her career. I didn't see a lot of her stuff in Shimmer, but I'll get to that. So talking heads are Mick Foley, Taylor Wilde, Crowbar, also known as Devin Storm. He was great here. He had worked with Daffney in WCW. Darren, who was her brother, he was great. Quentin, the father, he was great. Lexi Fife, Amanda Rodriguez, Caleb Conley. There were some great talking heads here, and Caleb provided a lot of great insight because he was getting in the wrestling business and they had dated for a little bit, but Jesus. All right. So, I will say this. Had it not been for Daffney and Crowbar and WCW, and this is coming from somebody that had rewatched a majority of that for my own, just degrading, like degradation, just basically destruction of what little bit of grip I have on wrestling reality. I mean, that's about the best way I can say it. It made me wonder what I was doing with my life, but it was a whole lot of fun. Daffney was a highlight. Crowbar was a highlight. David Flair was also there. I'm not knocking David Flair, but David Flair, he found the stalker character, whatever it was, carrying the crowbar. Why he was carrying Devon Storm, I don't know, but she nailed her debut. I mean, you see like her, as rocking with a teddy bear and the gothic makeup. And the thing is Daffney, beautiful woman. I remember absolutely being captivated, just thinking, dear God, where has she been? Because you look at her, I mean, she's very beautiful, very fetching, very, in your face as far as like her character and reaction and stuff like that. But we did get shoot interview footage also from 2001, from like 2013, I believe. And her official debut kind of in ring, I mean, as far as appearing on camera, was Starrcade 1999 when DDP beat up David Flair. Starrcade 99 also was the same pay-per-view where the end of Bret Hart's career happened when Bill Goldberg kicked Bret Hart in the head after dropping his foot, and he dropped on his head, the back of his head, doing the figure four spot, because other wrestlers will do things to protect their opponents. You know who won't do that? Bill Goldberg. So, whatever she was given, she could work. She even got to cake Stacy on Nitro. That's not a euphemism. Crowbar and Daffney were a natural pair. Just on camera, they were just a natural pair. And a Crowbar provides some great insight here. Darren and Daffney were inseparable. They were military brats. The scream came from an early age, and she was able to parlay that. I love the scream. It made her stand out, and she could just do it really goddamn well. She was in some major motion pictures before she was age 10. Santa Claus 1985, which I keep forgetting about. And in Insigniance, excuse me, I think that was the name of it. So good on her. Imagine if she had gotten into acting and then not gotten into doing wrestling. Who knows where her career would have gone. She has a gymnastics background. No wonder she was flexible and actually could do some good stuff and do some impressive shit. She would do the Frankensteiner. They called the Franken Screamer. That was some good stuff. And she's a former Cruiserweight champion. Yeah, I believe it was her. I think she won it after Medusa, because Medusa won like late 99, early 2000. And yeah, then Daffney. I believe Daffney and Crowbar traded the title. And I think Chris Candido had it for a little bit. Very messy time in WCW. So Lexi and Daffney were friends. She had some really heartbreaking stuff here at the end of this. And WCW folded. Daffney was on she was in a depression, but she was also on a developmental deal, but after like 9 months, they let her go. Yeah, they weren't taking women's wrestling seriously. Now, and I'm not knocking Daffney when I say this. I mean, none of anything I say, any chat like this, I don't want to make it sound like I'm knocking her. But if she had had more of a grip on what she was going through, and the company had been willing to help her out too. Let's make an emphasis on that, because they weren't really doing that back then. It took Eddie Guerrero passing away at 38 and Chris Benoit Murray and his family for them to pretend they care. But it didn't work out in WWE. So she got a divorce from her husband. I don't know who her husband was. I don't really care. And the depression kept hitting. And, for like 3 months, she would only get 1 hour of sleep at night. That's because she just couldn't wind down. She couldn't, none of this stuff. Bipolar disorder. And a big discussion on bipolar. In fact, that was pretty much like, I'd say 50% of this episode. Which, I mean, you're suffering from it. And there were other wrestlers in this, like Amanda Rodriguez who talked about it. She was great in it. Actually, all the talking heads pretty much were equal. Like, there were, except for the family. I think the family stood out there. But there was a lot of good stuff here. And heartbreaking, but good stuff. And the meds basically fucked her up. They would cause her to gain weight, but then she'd feel she had to burn that off. And there has to be a better way to balance these meds and make it so people don't gain weight, because then people would you rather be bulkier and less depressed possibly, Or would you rather be thin and beautiful? And I'm using those in quotations because there was nothing wrong with how Daphne looked at the end. She clearly looked unhealthy as far as her mental state, but that does not mean that there was anything unattractive about her. She was just spiraling and she needed help. You know, in an entertainment business like this, you would make sure that you want to look your best. 2003, she goes on the indie circuit. This is after a stint in a hospital for a little bit. Her brother talked about that. Shimmer, the Shimmer run really did work well for her. One, Daphne looks great here. Doing a lot of stuff. I do remember seeing the Shimmer was running for a bit. I don't think Shimmer runs anymore. I think they shut down sometime a few years ago. But Taylor Wilde mentioned something about alluding to that Shimmer was the first women's wrestling promotion, which, no, there was Wow Women of Wrestling. I don't know if Glow would necessarily count. Maybe in the U.S., but there were Japanese women's promotions. But whatever, Shimmer, as far as an independent promotion, I guess, was probably the first major women's one. And Caleb and her ended up dating. Caleb was 20. He was just getting in the wrestling business, been in there for a couple of years. I believe he still wrestles now. I think he wrestles in the NWA, if I recall correctly. But the bipolar disorder, unfortunately, did affect the relationship. They would end up having a friendship. He felt guilt because there was nothing he could do, but also that they were young and in love and this kind of stuff, but it wasn't going to work out. And then we get to something that I absolutely hated. She knocked it out of the park, but The Governor. The parody of Sarah Palin. You don't need to parody Sarah Palin because Sarah Palin's a dumb idiot that has dumb children, and she deserves to be endlessly mocked, repeatedly. So do her children. She can see Russia from her backyard. Why don't you go to Russia, you dumb bitch? But she was the governor. A parody of Sarah Palin, Daphne was. And I honestly did not know it was her at first. Probably because I was a little bit wondering what the fuck was going on here because they were starting to kind of muck up the Knockouts division. I said stupid fucking Russo because it was a Russo. It had to have been a Russo idea. There's almost no way it wasn't. If it wasn't, it was a Dixie idea. Speaking of dumb broads. So, Dr. Stevie. Remember when Stevie Richards was a doctor despite the fact he had been a professional wrestler and been on WWE programming for a while and had done independence, and we know he's a fucking wrestler? Yeah, he was suddenly Dr. Stevie in the thing with Abyss and all this stuff. It wasn't good. But he brought back Daphne. Foley wanted her to be in his group. That's when Foley was a heel and feuding with Abyss, and more on this in a minute. And Foley, you could tell, was broken up by some of the stuff that was done. Even though it was discussed and they wanted to make sure she was okay with it. There was a spot at Bound for Glory 2009 where she got chokeslammed through a barbed wire board with stuff on it. I think it was a barbed wire board on a table or something like that, but she hit her head. It's not the fall that hurts, it's that quick stop. She broke her arm. She had no memory of the fall. And I think Lexi might even, I don't remember if it was Lexi or Taylor. It was one of the two. But they said that she wasn't too sure about doing that, but she was willing to do it. Foley felt guilt. I believe he went in the ambulance with her and said, he wished that they had made a different call. Now, Foley shouldn't blame himself. And none of the talking heads that are her friends blame the other wrestlers. This is just what happens. But she got back in the ring too soon. I do remember seeing Bound for Glory 2009. That was one of the TNA pay-per-views I ordered. It was also one of the last TNA pay-per-views I ordered. At least regularly. But I do remember watching that and thinking, and Daphne landed. I go, well, that doesn't look good. That doesn't look very, oh shit. And she came back, and it was clear that she was putting on a good front, but even I could tell on television she wasn't doing that well. But then Rosie, lot of love. I don't remember who she ended up becoming later when she, I guess, lost weight and stopped being the Bertha Faye knockoff. But she just did the earthquake, or the Mabel drop. Just drop and land with all your weight. But the thing is, Daphne said if she hadn't moved, she would have had a badly bruised sternum, but not the other concussion. Maybe if this fucking goddamn waste of space hadn't just landed on her stupidly and done a different move, then none of this would have happened. And I don't think she was intentionally trying to injure her, but she was clearly a fucking klutz and doesn't really belong in the wrestling business. TNA, or rather Dixie, that stupid broad that I have nothing nice to say about and would honestly just yell in her face that she was a terrible businesswoman. And other wrestling fans should do the same, because you had all your dad's money, dad and mom's money. You were also somewhat independently wealthy, just a spoiled rich twat. Didn't pay for the medical bills of Jesse Sorensen, but didn't pay for the medical bills of Daffney, somebody that had put a lot of years into professional wrestling, got injured doing stuff that you could have said no to, but you never knew anything about the wrestling business. And now all of a sudden, now Daffney has to sue them because they didn't take care of her medical bills because Dixie's a fucking heartless twat. And a settlement. And they gave her a bunch of her action figures to hawk at, independent shows. Now, they probably gave her some money, maybe. I mean, I don't actually know if they gave her that much, but they gave her all those action figures. TNA action figures that really aren't worth fucking shit. I know, because years ago, when they were doing a warehouse clean, I did some unboxing videos about a bunch of stuff that I got that were there. That was, whatever it was. It was just the Don West, rest in peace, Don West. The Don West grab bag thing or whatever the fuck it was. But, yeah, here's some action figures that you can fucking hawk instead of us taking care of you. That felt really bad for Daffney here. The injuries piled up. The bump card basically was tapped out. Some people have a bump card that lasts them for 40 years. Some people last 20. Daffney, because of the various things that was going on, head injuries, that kind of stuff, her bump card, and she had periods where she wasn't in wrestling as much. She, actually would end up, her bump card was like about 10, 11 years, maybe. So, actually about 10 years now that I think about it, because she had that break when she went to Shimmer again, so about 10 years. Then, basically, the brain trauma was making her depression worse. Because if you're already chemically imbalanced, suffering from depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever you are suffering from, it is going to be difficult to do that. And if you're whacking your brain constantly, if you're just a regular person working a job like myself, it's one thing. But if you're a professional wrestler, you're constantly putting your body on the line, day after day, match after match. She started a group with some women that also suffer from bipolar. I believe Lexi's in there. I believe Amanda's in there. I don't remember if Taylor's in there. But the whole point is that she still wanted to be in wrestling. They even got matching tattoos, which I thought was very sweet, and that was very, very, the happy, sad thing, on their wrists and stuff like that, and just, But, she was vlogging. She wants to come back. Unfortunately, she had to retire in 2011. The family basically was like, they were putting their foot down. They want her to succeed, but they don't want to lose their, they don't want to lose their blood. They don't want to lose their, somebody that's a part of them. And Amanda talked about the tattoo, as I said. And she was having dizzy spells, vertigo. So she wasn't even really able to do refereeing. She couldn't remember where she was at when she went to the grocery store. And she wanted to donate her brain to a Boston CTE clinic or hospital. And she was drinking. She would get DUIs, car accidents, this kind of stuff. She contemplated taking her own life. I'm using the words carefully because I don't want to get flagged. But weight gain because of the meds, so she was having confidence issues there. Again, I think there should be a way to balance that out where weight gain isn't a big thing about it. I'm just saying, because that's just going to shatter your confidence right there. There's nothing wrong with how she looked. It just, then the fans were starting to say some mean things. I have been guilty of saying some mean things, and I really need to stop doing that. I really do. I try to use dark humor. Sometimes I just get too angry, and I really need to settle down with that. I don't know if I'll be able to, but I'll really need to settle down with that. So, and she was good to her fans, but then there were some fans, I don't even really want to call them fans of hers. I mean, there were fans that were showing genuine concern, like, wow, is she okay? And when I saw recent, footage of her, this, before the Instagram Live thing, I remember thinking, oh, wow, is she okay? Like genuine question if you haven't seen somebody in the spotlight for a while. Mine was out of concern, but you could still tell she was Daffney. She still had the personality. She still had the fire. But she was struggling. And then, there was a thyroid issue in addition to all the stuff. So that was giving her problems. And then COVID, the isolation. And family helped her get a new apartment. She got a new job. Things seem to be going well. And I swear I was going to get the crying out of my system. But the Instagram Live thing, and I never want to, I will never watch this episode again. I can't. I can't. I can't revisit this. I can't. There are things that are tough, but just, she was talking about taking her own life, basically giving her note out there. She'd taken her roommate's gun. And the recounting of this will break anything. And there was a point where Lexi had... Lexi got her in the rehab. It was earlier in the program that they mentioned this. And that if she was having thoughts of taking her own life, to call her. She said to Lexi, I'm sorry, I'm going to break my promise. That's, that I had to pause, and I was like, all right, I need a break for a second, because Crowbar, Taylor, Foley, couldn't get through to her. The mailbox is full. The brother and parents were going. Guess she was living in Atlanta at the time, if I remember right. And then the feed went black, and everybody was hoping, oh, the police got there. They didn't get there in time. The parents were obviously distraught. Darren held it together a lot better than I would have if I had been in that. I mean, I'm saying, recounting it. And I would left a hole that Lexi was pissed because she had a daughter that knew her as Aunt Shannon. Caleb was gutted. He was like, I gotta go to a show, and I gotta put on a happy face in this. And nobody hates her for it, but the thing is that's, whenever you do that, and, I mean, obviously, nobody that's watching this, well, actually, some people might know, and I'm not don't recount your stuff. I don't want you to do it if it's too tough, but if you know somebody that has, then it can affect you. Because you wonder what if. And I know people that have, and I wonder what if. Even if I was far away, even if we hadn't been in contact as much, I do wonder what if. But, the last, 15 to 20 minutes of this is just fucking God, oh, Jesus Christ. They're going through the family photos, second grade picture, all that stuff. The publicity photo that her, Crowbar, and David did. I'm surprised they didn't get David Flair for this. But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to participate. Maybe they didn't want to ask him. Maybe they didn't think it was pertinent. I would have liked to have heard from David Flair. He hasn't done many interviews. He's been living a quiet life since, leaving wrestling after 2003 or 4. And Boston studied her brain, found a CTE. quite a bit. And she did charity work with NAMI, that's NAMI. And her friends want to carry that on. And then there was a woman named, excuse me. I'm sorry. Named Vicky Lyons. That was in an accident, something like that. It was on Forensic Files, I believe Foley said. And she always wanted to wrestle. And Daffney says, I'm going to teach you and we're going to have a match. To help her live her dream, because that's the kind of person Daffney was. She even put her over. Gah! Scream Queen and Job Queen. There you go. She is sorely missed. Everybody's recounting what she meant to them. I wish she was still here, just because it would have been nice for everybody involved. Her especially. Her family and her friends could still be there, and who knows. Next week's Muhammad Hassan. That's the end of the season. I don't have anything. I don't have a pitch here. You guys know where to find me. It's down in the description. I'm going to put the national hotline in the description as well. The original Scream Queen. Hell of a life. Battled through her demons. Even if they took hold, she wanted to make sure that she was able to get back. And so this wouldn't happen to anybody else. And as loved as she was, I think that's what we need to remember. Let's watch some WCW stuff and appreciate her. And also understand that she gave everything, literally everything, to this business. Rest in peace, Daffney.